is Hope Charters. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 15 years old. And before I was even diagnosed, my grandpa and uncle had both died at around 40 years old from diabetes complications. 40 years of life, that's all they got. So when you don't have enough insulin, your body starts breaking down. And imagine the fear that that instilled in me from day one. You take insulin or you die. 2 years after my diagnosis, my dad lost his job and our family's health insurance. Cue the anxiety and panic for my parents, who just wanted to make sure that I lived. They were offered COBRA insurance through the state of Indiana at $2,300 per month. This was obviously not an option, so my mom picked up a part-time job to be able to pay for insulin and supplies out of pocket. My mom made $32,000 to support a family of 4, and it was above the maximum threshold allowed for the patient assistance program. We got denied the help through the pharmaceutical company's PAP because they considered her to be making too much money. Paying for my insulin and supplies out of pocket wasn't sustainable, and I remember my mom always shuffling bills around and working with companies to change due dates to try to make ends meet. And luckily, we found a clinic that was able to give me free insulin samples during the months we couldn't afford it. I'm now living on my own, and I'm privileged enough to have good insurance and enough money to pay for the insulin I need to survive. However, if I didn't have health insurance, the out-of-pocket cost for insulin for a year, according to my actual 2017 medical costs, would be around $9,540. Just let that sink in. The cost for me to survive for 12 months and what insulin manufacturing companies like Eli Lilly expect me to pay is $9,540. Something needs to change. Regulations need to be set so that pharmaceutical companies can't price people out of life.
My name is Sarah Skipper. I have been type 1 diabetic since I was 5 years old. Diabetes has been an unwished-for patron in my family for quite some time. My mother's sister passed away from complications of type 1 diabetes a few months after I was born, and my little sister was diagnosed when she was 7. Insulin has not always been easily accessible to us. Throughout the years, I have received insulin through donations from other family members, neighbors, and samples from my doctor. Once I turned 18, things really took a turn for the worse. I was in college, 3 hours away from home, rationing my doses. I aged out of my pediatrician and could no longer receive samples from her. I kept being denied for Medicaid, so I had to make my insulin stretch. I should have been taking 4 to 5 shots a day. I was taking 2, 3 at the most. Rationing my doses led to rationing my food. If I ate more, then I would need to take more insulin, and insulin that I did not have. At the time, my sister was living in Virginia and would send me vials. When she ran low from sparing me, my grandparents would pay cash for hers. I was a full-time student and made it to class when I could. My grades were subpar, and so was my health. All of my professors knew my situation, but some were not so eager to help me since I would sleep or spent most of class in the bathroom. Fast forward to the summer of 2018, I am a full-time employee with insurance and benefits through my job. After insurance, my prescription is a smidge over $1,000. Of course, I couldn't afford this. My sister and I are sharing insulin, and both are rationing to ensure that one another has enough. Per usual, my sister and I took our nighttime insulin, except this time we were to the bottom of the vial, and I assumed she took her regular dose. Unfortunately, that was not the case. My sister took half of her dose so that I could have enough to take mine. The next day, she went into DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. I was with her when she got sick. Her blood sugar was over 600, and her target was 100 between 120, and she was vomiting. During her stay at the hospital, she had to have a PICC line, an IV implanted through her neck. All the while, her face was as green as the grass being released from the hospital 4 days later. We both were playing with a double-edged sword, but I'd much rather it had been me than her. All this because I can't afford my insulin. What's the point of me working and having these great benefits if I can't pay for what I need to live, and my sister is fighting for her life because she was trying to save me? Hoosiers should not have to suffer from the impractical reasoning behind inflating prices of life-sustaining medicine.
Unfortunately, too often I find myself in the position where I'm across the room from a patient who says, "Doc, I couldn't pick up my medications today because I can't afford them." An elderly woman with type 2 diabetes who's legally blind came into my office stating she could no longer afford her insulin. This is a woman who has a pension from GE. She worked her whole life. Her pension is $800 a month, and at this time her insulin was costing over $1,000 a month. So between her pension and her Social Security, she was not able to afford this. We tried to get her free insulin for months using consumer discounts direct from the pharmaceutical company, but she made just enough monthly income and did not qualify for those. Ultimately, she was forced to use a less effective, more dangerous form of intermediate-acting insulin that has to be administered by her partner using a syringe. As you've heard, what happens is patients end up sharing medications, they end up rationing medications, and this ends up being a cost that's passed on to the taxpayer because these patients end up in the hospital with worsening disease and even death. But the one thing that's very clear is that the people who are carrying the brunt of this situation are the patients who are becoming sicker.
My name is Taya Keeler. I'm a registered nurse, diabetes educator, and owner at Diabetes Coaches, LLC. I've lived with type 1 diabetes, otherwise known as T1D, for over 28 years. I'm here today to voice my strong support for House Bill 1029. T1D is not preventable. There is no cure for T1D. A person can be diagnosed at any age or any stage of life. If people with T1D do not have affordable access to insulin, they will die. As a child, my parents neglected to take care of my T1D. As a result, I have stage 3 kidney disease, extensive nerve damage, limited vision in my right eye, and I am completely blind in my left eye. I'm sharing this so that you understand some of the complications that can occur when the body is deprived of insulin, when insulin is rationed, when insulin is inaccessible and or unaffordable. As a healthcare professional, I regularly work with families dealing with the insurmountable costs of T1D. I often feel helpless because most of these families do not qualify for coupons or patient assistance programs. Clinics in my local area are turning patients away because so many are dependent on insulin samples. I support House Bill 1029 because corporate healthcare is not working. Profit over people is not working. Because we need transparency to ensure that insulin is affordable for every patient. Because any barrier to insulin or exploitation of those who depend on this life-saving drug is shameful and criminal. Because like the core values that guide Eli Lilly and Company, I believe in integrity, excellence, and respect for the people. Because almost 100 years since the discovery of insulin, people with T1D are still dying, not due to scarcity of insulin, but due to greed and a lack of moral and ethical courage. I support this bill because I am fighting for my life. Never underestimate people with T1D. We are fighters. We go to bed knowing that we may not wake up the next morning. We will continue to fight until we see affordable, accessible insulin for all.